post the recording. Cool. All right. All right, everybody, good evening. My name is Jess Clerget. I am a graduate student at San Francisco State University in the Kinesiology department. I'm also the president of the Exercises Medicine Club on campus. So today, before we get started, just some housekeeping as you come in. Please keep yourselves muted. If you have any questions, you can drop them in the chat. We will get to them at the end. Exercises Medicine is a global initiative. The main goal was to bridge the gap between healthcare and physical activity. An example of that would be to get physical activity actually as a vital sign in the healthcare system. And there is this sub-initiative that came to college campuses because Exercises Medicine realized that college students are in a really critical time of their lives to build lifelong healthy habits and be active. So Exercises Medicine on campus, there's about 280 participating universities, San Francisco State being one of them. And we actually have two goals with the San Francisco State initiative. Is one, we want to improve physical activity on campus. With over 20,000 students, that is a very big task. So our second purpose is to create confident and strong leaders in the field of kinesiology and other health sciences so that we can all work together to move the mission forward collaboratively. And what my team of student leaders and I noticed is when you ask students, where are you going to be in 5 years? What do you want to do after you graduate? It's such a big question mark. And so we wanted to bring on some people that we know have had tons of experiences through various stages of education to share with you firsthand the decisions they made, why they made them, what directions they went, and things they would do differently if they could. So I'm going to bring Dr. Bagley on, who is our advisor for the Exercises Medicine Initiative, to introduce these ladies.
All right. Can you give me ability to screen share real quick? I guess while she's getting that going, thanks Exercise Medicine and Jessica for having me here. I'm really honored to present these two speakers. I've known them for a while now, going back in the day, right? So we've got soon to be Dr. Kaylie Zapanta and Dr. Kathryn McLeland. So I'll kind of go in the order. Let's see if I can screen share. You should be able to click that on the bottom, Jessica, to access it. But I'll go down through your accolades real quick while we're here. So soon to be Dr. Zapanta did her bachelor's degree at Cal State Fullerton, and that's kind of a through line that the three of us have together, is we've all got some background at Fullerton, so we're the Titans, right? Then she got her master's up here at SF State in our kinesiology program, and that's where we first met back in 2015. And then she went to get a second master's at USC, where she's now working on her PhD and just about to finish. So just finished her thesis, I'm sure, or her dissertation. I'm sure she'll talk about that as well. And then we've got Dr. Kathryn McLeland. So she got her bachelor's down at Biola in Southern California, and then master's at Cal State Fullerton. I also got my master's at Fullerton, so that's the connection. That's where we met originally back there. And then she got her doctor's of physical therapy degree at Northwestern, so back in the Midwest, and then came back to California to do her orthopedic residency at USC. So both of them have some big accolades here. Like I said, I've known them for a while. So Kaylie was actually one of my first master's student here at SF State. And so she was kind of the founding member of the Muscle Phys Lab. And I'm just really proud to see how far she's gone, and she's still going. So I'm sure she'll talk about kind of her future endeavors there. And then I've known Kathryn even longer. I think it was 2014. Is that right? It was
either 14 or 13. It was early.
So I was in my PhD, finishing that up at Ball State University, and Kathryn was a master's student working with Dr. Andy Galpin at Fullerton. And we kind of had some overlapping interests and started doing research back then. And I think we've published probably, how many papers together now?
It's like 3? A lot, at least 3 from that time frame.
Yeah. So we published quite a bit on all kinds of different studies. And the same thing with Kaylie too. I think her thesis was the first bout that I got into with spaceflight research and muscle physiology, and she kind of pioneered some of the techniques I just remember, Kaylee, every picture of us is you isolating muscle fibers and me just kind of watching. So it kind of looks like I wasn't doing anything, but
it looks very official. Yeah.
yeah, it looks pretty official. But yeah, so I'm happy to introduce those two. If Jessica could give me access to screen share, I could do that. There we go. Perfect. So those are the pictures I wanted to show. So you can see that's our first Muscle Phys Lab meeting there on the left. And Kaylee is repping the Ducks, Anaheim Ducks there up in NorCal even. So I think that was okay. That flew there pretty good. And then we got some other familiar faces in that picture too. Jessica was there for the first meeting as well. And then we've got ACSM. That was early in 2015 when we were presenting some data. So I'm sure that Kathryn will talk to you about presenting things at conferences and how important that is. That was us with Dr. Galpin. And then just some shameless plugs for our program. If you're interested in our grad program, there's the link there. You can check it out and feel free to drop in my office hours. You can make an appointment there. I'm happy to meet with any students. Even if you're not at SF State, I'm happy to chat with you about anything there. So again, thanks Exercise is Medicine, and I'll let you all take it away.
Cool. Thank you. So ladies, in any order, I think first and foremost, we'd love to hear just about your experiences in your undergrad and kind of what led you to that first next step in your education.
I can go first.
Sure.
So the question was undergrad and then go through the whole thing or start?
Yeah.
Okay,
Take it
cool.
away.
Yeah, so I'm Kaylee, as everyone said. Nice to meet everybody. I did my my undergrad at Cal State Fullerton, and when I entered into college, I wanted to be a PE teacher. So I started doing like pedagogy and a little bit of strength and conditioning, and mostly like health and human performance-esque type courses. And then as I went through the program at Cal State Fullerton, I got more and more interested in research. And so I think it was like my last semester, I decided I really like research and I want to do this. I was also pretty tired by the time I graduated with my undergrad. So I took a 2-year gap year. I worked as a personal trainer and a coach, and I did a lot of different internships, just kind of trying to get my feet wet in like every aspect of kinesiology. So I worked in a PT clinic. I worked in a strength and conditioning facility at UCI or UC Irvine. I did just a bunch of things. And then I ultimately decided to go back to school and get my master's and then my PhD. And I was pretty dead set on doing that from the moment I started grad school. I think when I started working with Dr. Bagley, my first day I walked into his office and was like, I want to get a PhD. Nice to meet you. I started working with him, and I also worked with Andy Galpin. I did my undergrad and he advised me down there at Cal State Fullerton. But when I moved up to San Francisco, I started working with Dr. Bagley and got really into muscle physiology and doing some work in spaceflight, and basically kind of trying to figure out what happens to muscle when it atrophies, and kind of using spaceflight and the atrophy that happens in like a zero gravity environment as a way to kind of learn more about muscle phys. I actually, through that process, got really interested in metabolism, and I wanted to look at and kind of like switch gears from a strength and conditioning and performance side of things to look at clinical populations. Just because I think that I got really passionate about the whole exercise as medicine concept, but I wanted to work with people who were legitimately living with chronic illnesses like cancer and Parkinson's disease and such, and see how exercise could help benefit them. So I went down to USC and I ended up getting another master's degree working with Christina Daly-Conwright, who does cancer and exercise and metabolism, metabolic syndrome type research. And I got fully immersed in metabolism research, in exercise, and specifically clinical exercise research, and kind of the world of an R1 or a Research 1 institution, as it were. I had every intention of staying in cancer and exercise research, but through life's twists and turns, my advisor actually left because she got another position at another university. And so I found myself kind of advisorless. And I think that's just kind of the way it goes in grad school. I'm sure that, you know, any Dr. Bagley or Kathryn, Jessica, any of us can say that it's not a linear journey when you go through grad school, for sure. It ended up working out really well for me. I started working with Beth Fisher, and through my master's at USC, I got interested in looking at the gut microbiome. As you can imagine, the gut microbiome is related to metabolism, and I got really interested in looking at colon cancer survivors and how when they go through chemotherapy treatments, their gut microbiome just completely gets thrashed. I got super interested in it, and I'm still very, very interested in the gut microbiome today. And I actually look at the gut-brain axis. Beth Fisher is one of the forefront, or the researchers at the forefront of looking at how Parkinson's disease can be kind of attenuated or alleviated with exercise. So I switched gears from a cancer population and started looking at neurophysiology and people with Parkinson's disease. And that is what I am about to get my PhD in. I graduate later this week, which is wild, crazy to think about. I study now the gut-brain axis in Parkinson's disease and how exercise can be beneficial. And so it's kind of ironic because Dr. Bagley has done a lot of work in the gut microbiome and athletes. I was there when he started that work, but I wasn't actually a part of it. But we've always kind of like been doing adjacent research ever since I left San Francisco State, which is really cool. Yeah, and then I am going to start a postdoctoral fellowship at USC, so I'm going to stay in LA and kind of continue this work in Parkinson's and exercise. And if anyone ever wants to talk about the gut microbiome, I'm totally down to do that. So that's me.
Thank you, Kaylie. That's awesome. I think some good takeaways from your story, just starting off, is some people maybe have an interest in the field of kinesiology, but your interest changed and evolved as you went through your academic, journey. And so you don't necessarily need to know exactly what you want to study or exactly what you're interested in to continue to move forward with your education. Yeah, awesome. Kathryn, we'll bounce back and forth between you two, of course, but do you want to give us your reel, Kathryn? Oh, let me unmute you. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
And then I have a couple, I just made some pictures. Can I put some pics up? So anyways, I started at Biola University, and I was a collegiate swimmer and athlete, and that's kind of how I got into the field of kinesiology. Our swim coach actually opened up, our practices each season, talking about what we would now, know as a macro cycle, but he didn't use that language, but that's what it was, and discussing like, all right, we're going to have this, we're working this energy system at this part of the season. This is how it's going to our championship meets. So I was like, oh, that's so interesting how training is going to affect performance. And that was in high school. So after that, in college, I was still interested in performance and sport performance, but being an athlete and then studying it. And so I was a pre-PT, but I wasn't necessarily interested in physical therapy right away. I hadn't really worked at a clinic. I had been in the weight room. I'd been in the pool. My dad was a cross country and track coach, so I was around sport a lot. And so that's where the draw was to go to Cal State Fullerton after undergrad. And that's where I really got the experience with Dr. Bagley particularly, and in working in like more muscle phys. Let me just pop this up. Can you see that, everybody? Cool. Okay. Yeah, we're working with muscle phys, our little muscle fiber bundle down here, but that was a new experience, and I really liked the side of exercise testing. We had the opportunity to work with the LA Kings and to work with high profile athletes that you're kind of seeing this gold standard of performance. And so in the laboratory and getting experience and research, I was like, well, I'm also curious about the clinical component to that. And so that's what led me to physical therapy. And someone put in a question, apart from sports and exercise injuries, why do you think so many people are patients in PT, and how can we fix this problem? And I think that kind of as Kaylie mentioned, and also like what Jessica mentioned with exercise is medicine, the more you can at this stage extend your web or extend your experience and gain those even just a taste of like, well, what does an exercise physiologist do? What does a strength and conditioning coach do? Even if that's maybe not your total career path, just having that exposure. Because I've had, like I said, these opportunities in PT school was more on the clinical side, but you can speak the language. So like Kaylie, or yeah, future Dr. Zapanta, and then Jimmy, Dr. Bagley, we all have in common is this, like the foundation at Cal State Fullerton, the foundation of research. We kind of can speak that same language. So the pictures you see here, just kind of expanding. This guy, the older gentleman, old photo here, that's my great grandpa. He was a YMCA director. So understanding what is like group fitness, how do we stay healthy through the lifespan? So in PT, work a lot with older adults, and some of it is like a sit to stand from a chair is their squat. And so we're going to still take those same principles of strength and conditioning and translate it over to a clinical setting of this older adult who's like, I've never lifted a weight in my life. I'm like, well, you lifted a bag of groceries, and that's the same, we're going to use that as your load, your progressive overload. Like I said, this little, our muscle sample, these two ladies in the middle, they're two, Jacqueline Perry and Helen Hislop. They're two, I would say founding mothers, you could say, of physical therapy. And so just understanding, one, helped develop just what we know as physical therapy today in terms of clinical practice. And the other, Jacqueline Perry, she helped to develop the gait cycle. So each different phase of walking, right? And kind of breaking down the biomechanics there. That is also kinesiology and understanding where that comes from. And then up here, it looks like a baseball batting cage, because it is. I had the opportunity with the core lab, which is the clinical orthopedic outcome measure lab at USC. And they were doing some data collection. I got to participate and do some data collection up there with the Pac-12. They have a Pac-12 grant, and we're working with UC Santa Barbara, doing some data collection with their baseball team and pitchers. And they need a physical therapist to, take certain tests. So I was measuring more of a range of motion, right? These were some of the PhD students. They were doing ultrasound. So basically all that to say is taking every opportunity you can to understand the language of kinesiology and understand more about our field. And then that can kind of help direct and guide you in terms of patient care, prevention, wherever you find your niche, I guess. And I did have, so this is kind of, this is what we think like our career timeline is going to look like. I'm going to go to undergrad, and then I'm going to go to grad school maybe, and then maybe I have a career job, and then next. And I also took some time off after Cal State Fullerton, and I coached high school track, and it was so much fun. And you learn so much from working with young athletes and understanding like they are learning how to use their growing bodies, and you're like, oh my goodness. So just exposure there. And then I did go back and do my DPT at Northwestern, which was a fantastic experience. But it doesn't look like this. It looks more like this in terms of what is going to fill your mind. What is the things that you love and enjoy doing? And that's where just gaining all these experiences really helped me to understand, well, I enjoy being in the classroom. I enjoy teaching. And so I'm still teaching in the DPT program. I enjoy splitting my time in the clinic. So I still work with patients. And then you can find those little niche populations or things that you enjoy and kind of put those things together. So yeah, that's a little bit, this looks more like my career timeline. It's still moving forward, but yeah, so currently I teach the first year students in clinical skills and patient management classes for the DPT hybrid and residential pathways. And then in terms of research, still doing a little bit with some pain science. We're looking at some healthy individuals. And then I work full-time in the clinic and hospital down here in Southern California. So all of those things go into mind, and just continuing to gain this experience in different areas.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Kathryn. So
Yeah.
I wanted to circle back a little bit because both of you, so Kathryn went the PT physical therapy route and Kaylie went the PhD route, but both of you did have that master's right in the middle. And I think for a lot of students, maybe they are looking forward and excited about PT school, but aren't sure if they're going to get into the first time around applying, or they just aren't sure what they want to do, but they know they want to keep learning. So could you guys kind of speak to and encourage, if you want to, a master's specifically for these students who aren't quite sure what they want to do?
Yeah, I mean, I think knowing that I wanted to get a PhD, I think a master's is kind of more common to do, although there's people that do straight from undergrad to get a PhD, just like people who do undergrad straight into a DPT program. But I can say that like I definitely got immense amounts of experience and knowledge, and just matured and was able to kind of grow as a scientist and just as a student with both the master's programs that I was a part of. I also know that in both the programs that I did, there were multiple students who were going along the program with me who ended up going to get a DPT. So they did the same like undergrad, master's, and then got a DPT. And I think especially with more competitive schools, like, unfortunately, there's just a lot of really smart people that apply to those programs, and USC is definitely really competitive. So a lot of students opted to do a master's first, and it allowed them, they did a master's specifically at USC. It's very expensive, and there's the financial burdens of all of that. But if you're able to do it, it's, a good experience for sure, because you're able to, not only it kind of gives you a leg up because you've got the master's as opposed to just a bachelor's degree, but then I think if you know the program that you want to do the DPT in, and you're going to get a master's at that same university, it's probably beneficial because you get to know the teachers, they get to know you, they can kind of get a better sense of, who you are as a student. You can get involved in research. And so when you're applying, then people know who you are versus like the hundreds or thousands of people that apply to all these DPT programs. So, yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. It is very competitive, especially if you're looking at some of the top ranking or top tiered programs, which I would say is a high value. And Kaylie mentioned too, like, this isn't cheap. Education is not cheap, but you're also thinking, okay, am I investing in pick your high-end sports car, pick your favorite car, versus like, am I going to go get a used car? Like, well, that's fine, but it's different purpose. So you really need to know what are your what are your main career goals and priorities so that you can choose. Because when we're looking at or seeing what students are successful, particularly coming in that first year, it's not always the students are like, we're straight A students, and all we do is school. Actually, the students that tend to be the most successful have more of a diverse background in terms of activities, and you're doing extracurricular, serving with your family or helping out, in your community. And you did this research in a master's, a master's program, and you get, good grades. But it's how do you manage all of those things at once? Because that is what, kind of being a physical therapist, being having a PhD, being a professor will look like. It's a lot of management. So I think that particularly the master's program for me was actually hands-on and doing the research. I managed to turn a two-year program into a 3-year program, but it was really exciting, right? It was fun science. It was a basic and applied. We got to be in, and it was one of the first projects where we were actually taking muscle samples and running the gels, right? And so there's so much troubleshooting going on, and that was experience that was like none other, right? So I wouldn't trade that, because it's a life skill, and it's understanding like, well, what is the research process even if students don't ever do research again, I say this with the DPT students, go and be a participant, you know, with a study on campus. Sometimes they'll pay you like $10 or like a gift card to Amazon, you know? And so it's just exposure and understanding more of the research process. So that's kind of helped me, and I would recommend. So
Awesome. Before we move on, Kathryn, did you draw that career pathway
absolutely.
yourself?
Yeah, I did it freehand with my trackpad.
Yeah. Well, I can't agree too. I started the master's program right out of undergrad and left to get a little bit more, get my hands dirty, get some experience in the field. And when I came back to finish the master's program, I felt like a much more mature student, and could speak to the information a little bit better. So I definitely did have that non-linear path. So what I wanted to move on to is when students are looking to a master's program or graduate school, I think that the standard instruction is to look up the school, find the professors who have similar interests in you. And that's kind of the only information they get. And they can dig on a website all they want, but sometimes it's hard to really know. And with the consideration that their advisor might change throughout their time in the program, can you both give your own take on how to even begin selecting a program and having confidence in the ones that they're applying to?
Yeah, I think if it's a master's program, and then I can speak to PhD, in my opinion, I think that the advisor matters the most. It kind of, in my experience, has gone like, make sure that you are looking for an advisor that you're going to mesh well with, that's going to challenge you, that's going to provide opportunities for you to grow as a scientist or as a future DPT. And then look for the, university as a whole, or I should say the department first. So like when I was looking at San Francisco State, I knew that I either wanted to work with Andy Galpin or Jimmy Bagley because I wanted to do muscle phys. So I was like, I didn't really do too much research into San Francisco State. I got very lucky because it's a great school. But I will say that like my experience was made because of the mentors that I had. So my whole committee on my master's thesis, every one of them was very influential in kind of shaping who I am as a scientist. I've also had some not so great experiences with advisors, like beyond San Francisco State. So I can definitely say that that's probably the most important thing, is to look for someone who has your best interests at heart. Is it going to be easy? Because you want to get the most out of it and you want to grow, and that's going to require, some pain and struggle along the way, but is, ultimately going to have your best interests at heart for sure. But I also think that like when you get to, if you decide on a master's program like SF State or, whichever you choose, just get involved as much as possible. I don't think that, even though professors are really, really busy, I don't think that they hate when a student says that they want to volunteer in the research lab or get involved in a club or just kind of sit down with them and have coffee and ask questions about what they do in their research. I certainly love talking about research, and I love like when students come and ask for help in our lab and just kind of want to get involved in research. That's honestly the best way, because if you just kind of come in, especially if it's a program that has more students, and you can get kind of like lost in the shuffle if you don't reach out and take the initiative. Don't be afraid, because professors like to talk, and they're happy to help you for sure. But I think that that's a really great way to kind of get involved and see, what it is that you do want to do outside of the classroom. The classes and the coursework is only a small portion of grad school. It's an important one, obviously, because you have to pass your classes, but it's not the most important. And I think that's probably the hardest transition to make, because undergrad, it's like all about getting good grades, making sure you have a good GPA. I would say that once you get into the master's program or PhD or even DPT level, you definitely want to like step it up and expand your scope and get more experience outside of the classroom too.
Yeah, I would speak to that too, because you're going to be spending a lot of time with a mentor or with a lab or with other students as well. So I think that do as much research as you can, right? So if it's a DPT, for example, what I did was the clinics that I was volunteering at or working at as an aide, basically I just was like asking the therapist a million questions. Where did you go to school? What did you like about your school? And that kind of gave me a scope of like, oh, ping, that's a school that I might be interested in. And then from there, I did some site visits. I visited Northwestern, obviously, which was at that time I was living in Chicago. So just went there. I actually did visit USC and just like to visit, ask questions, go to those campus open houses before you apply if you can. And then I went up to another school, like 3 schools in the Midwest, just take advantage and going and asking questions. So you can see a lot online, but sometimes it's a feel on the campus. You know, it is a give and take. Northwest, I can plug this, but it depends on the person. But Northwestern's on like a 7th floor, middle of the city, right? You're seeing a cityscape. USC is in like the heart of LA, and you got the medical campus and everything around there. So it really, the vibe, you're like, I'm going to be here a lot. So can I see myself? Can you actually see yourself there? I'm gonna do one more screen share here for you. It's not my own drawing, but so yeah, mentors and community are so huge. And we always say like Kaylie is like, just take the opportunity to be grateful. And so actually same picture. And I was gonna say, I don't know if Dr. Bagley's still on here, but I was like, most people as they age get less hair, but Dr. Bagley got more hair. Anyways, maybe he's not there to reiterate, but
I'm still here. I'm listening.
you heard that?
True.
Okay.
But don't say that to Dr. Galpin, because he's going the normal way.
I was going to say, Kathryn, this is the Dr. Bagley that I know.
I know, the Dr. Bagley with the bow ties.
Yeah.
Anywho, so yeah, that's a good skill to have, growing more hair, especially the stress of life. But yeah, just so who you're surrounding yourself with. This top corner, these are my classmates. This is at a CSM, or combined section meeting, a professional organization for the APTA. Here in the purple, the lady kneeling down, Dr. Amy Seitz, and then standing to her, next to her, Dr. Carol Courtney, just like people that you want to emulate, people that you can see yourself being, whether it's a research clinician or a PhD or a physical therapist only, like clinical only. These are my classmates here during our white coat ceremony. Those are the people you're going to be studying with, you're going to be doing life with. You're like, wow, we have this big exam, and like my family member's ill, because life still happens. So really taking the time and making, this is a big decision, but taking the time, picking professors' brains, mentors' brains, and also considering like who you're going to be around, because you'll be shaped and formed by those communities.
There we go. That's awesome, ladies. Thank you for that feedback. I think that what's really cool is that the opportunities in continued education are so much more than they used to be. So I guess what I would love to hear is, Kaylie, you went the PhD route, but that doesn't mean that you're just going to become a teacher, right? And I think that was the cliche we used to think was, you get your PhD, you teach. And we know that's not the case anymore. You mentioned scientist, and I think that the students would like to hear a little bit more on that. And then Kathryn, if you can restate too that, vocationally you went the DPT route, but that physical therapy is more than just, the standard assumption of it, working with the sports teams and things like that. So I think just what we want to hear next is, and you mentioned it in the beginning, what kind of opportunities we see outside of the cliche linear end game for this continued education.
Yeah, I think I got my PhD during a really interesting time. When I started grad school back in 2015, I had every intention of like doing the traditional academia route. So that's traditionally master's, PhD, a postdoc, and then faculty position, or master's, PhD, faculty position, just depending on the school. And that's still, I am doing a postdoc, but the interesting thing is that as I've gone through the program, I think that PhDs in the job market, especially in the industry, like health tech industry, have become much more in demand, in need. And I think it's just because there's so many health tech companies and there's so many like industry scientist positions that are needed. And even if like I look at some of these job postings for like a data scientist position, or even like medical science liaison, where you're working with these like pharmaceutical companies or different companies that are developing devices for, you know, anything in healthcare. As a PhD, you acquire skills to be able to like translate science to people who don't read research papers all day, or who don't write research papers all day. You know, you learn statistics, you learn how to, you know, analyze and collect data, and then you learn how to write it and communicate it. And so that's really outside of academia, those, I guess, skills have become a hot commodity for really great industry positions. And so as I kind of have gone through my PhD, I've been like, well, maybe I don't necessarily need to be a professor. I love teaching. So if I am able to get a faculty job, like I'll be super happy. But it's kind of cool to know that I've applied for and gotten a couple offers with different companies for research scientist positions. And it's just cool to know that your options are not limited to just academia, because I think at the same time that industry has kind of exploded and there's more opportunities for PhDs in that realm, in academia, the job market has kind of shifted as well. And so it's becoming increasingly more difficult to get a faculty job, which on the surface would be, if I were you, you'd probably be like, well, I'm not going to get a PhD. Like, why waste my time? Especially because it takes so long. But just know that if you do love like any sort of facet of like research or science, or just kind of like learning new things and sort of pushing the envelope on science and healthcare, that getting a PhD, you can do more than just teach, and you can do more than just academia.
Yeah, so I mean, the field of physical therapy is changing, and it's not just, this is kind of why I didn't initially want to go in. I was like, I'm gonna get see, you know, the same person do the same 5 exercises, and like that's what I thought physical therapy was. But with more exposure, I got to observe like in a neurological rehabilitation. That's actually where we worked with patients with Parkinson's, right? And then also stroke, and how do we help people just gain function? There's also a huge side to like virtual telehealth. If you have some of that background in personal training or strength and conditioning, there's a big need for even like preventative medicine or like prehab care. So that background knowledge is really helpful. So you can work in a clinic, and I know clinicians that they've worked in a clinic, the same one, non-owner, for 30 years, right? I also know physical therapists who do fireworks and own a physical therapy practice. I know physical therapists who they don't practice as a PT, they are more as a ATC and work with teams. So there's really a lot you can do with it. And regardless of, Kaylee's mentioning, like, with everyone thinks, oh, okay, PhD is going to take a really long time, but your career is a long time. So it kind of depends on what track of education that you want to go down. And either way, you're going to become, your interests are going to draw you into that specialization. So in terms of physical therapy, my interests were in orthopedics because more of a sport background, strength and conditioning, and muscle phys. So that's why I decided to go around the specialist route toward orthopedics, right? And so you can continue down that line. Now there's fellowships, and if you want to work with a team, or you do want to just work, you want to work in the clinic, or also a physical therapist, they don't practice as a PT, they have a DPT, but now they're going for a PhD, right? So it is a lot of letters, but eventually you're just, you know, just a first name basis anyway, right? So your passions kind of follow, go to that niche. And yeah, so there's a lot to do with PT. Again, it's like, just talk to people, ask them like, what's their story, what's their interest, what are they doing? And you're like, oh my gosh, that sounds cool, maybe I'll try. And you're like, that's for me, or well, it's not. But just kind of asking.
That's awesome. I also missed a great opportunity for shameless plug for the Exercises Medicine Club, because for those of you watching either now or later, that hands-on experience and just having conversations with people, you might not have known what occupational therapy was, but you knew what physical therapy was, and just these ways to really learn what are my options, because they really are endless. But I think what I really liked hearing recently from the both of you is that you kind of extended the timeline on your experiences in grad school, and it wasn't, strictly traditional. I think that what some students might want to hear is how your school work-life balance was through some of it. Kaylie, I'm pretty sure you planned a wedding during part of it. But some people might hesitate to continue their education because they just really gotta get a job, or they have life going on, or they want to live their life, early 20s. So maybe we can hear a little bit about that from the both of you.
Yeah, I've lived a lot of life during grad school. So a lot of things happen. I got married and moved a bunch and had, like big life events, and good and bad happen. And kind of what Kathryn was alluding to before, like life is going to happen no matter what. So that can make it really difficult to do grad school, because it is such an intense, college. You all know that college already is very intense, and then grad school kind of adds another layer to it. I think that it's okay to take your time, for sure. It's okay to not rush things. When I went into grad school, I was like, I'm going to be done in 5 years, and it's going to be just this straight shot to PhD, and it definitely hasn't been. But I think that the windy road that I've taken has made me a better scientist. And kind of like Jessica, you said, like the older you get, the more mature you are at like approaching, classes and things. So I think that a younger version of myself would probably not be in the same position that I am right now. I think one of the benefits of doing PhD work is it's oftentimes more difficult to find a position, because a lot of universities, like obviously DPT programs are really competitive, but they usually admit, a couple hundred or, a number of students every year. Whereas a PhD program, typically the university pays for your tuition, and then they give you a stipend on top of that to be either a teaching assistant or to be a research assistant. And so you get paid to go to school, basically. You don't get paid a lot, but it beats paying tuition, especially at USC, because it's really expensive. So I think that definitely helps, especially in California. The stipend for PhDs is not enough to survive. I know you guys know this. I lived in San Francisco for 2 years, so I definitely understand the cost of living is crazy. And LA, it's not much better, but it is something. So that definitely helps. And then I think that, especially during your master's, I feel like that can be the hardest time, because not many master's programs will have assistantships or allow you to like work, or you can work, but like not work for the university, like what you can do with a PhD. I know I worked like 2 or 3 jobs during my time at SF State, and that was very hard. But I think it's just kind of something that kind of have to do the grind. But I took 2 years off and I saved a bunch of money. So I don't obviously fault anybody for, I think, financial issues are real and hard. So, yeah.
Yeah, I would echo that. Like life keeps going, and it's not okay, I'm in grad school, but after I'm done, I'll like get back in my workouts, or I'll like get back to relationships with my family, or okay, I'll just pause, because life isn't really segmented like that. And then I think Maria in the chat was talking about just soft skills, and some of the big soft skills, like we each have this pie chart, also known as a clock. We have 24 hours in a day, right? And so you don't get 25, you don't get 23, you don't get extra. So how do you manage your time and your priorities, especially things like family time, studying, creating those boundaries, finances, right? Kaylie mentioned, working a couple jobs in grad school. That was similar for me. I did, when I was at Cal State Fullerton, I worked at a water park and I was a lifeguard. So those are like early morning hours, I'd work like 5 to 8 a.m. and then go to class or go to the lab, whatever you need to do. And then even in PT school, not typically recommended because the money you make is really a drop in the bucket. You need to be all in. But as time went on, I was able to do like some personal training on the side, right? Because I had that experience. And then in residency, I did dog walking, right? So yeah, you don't get paid a lot in these early years, right? But you learn to get creative. And I was like, okay, well, I can get paid to walk a dog and I'm getting my steps in. Win-win, right? I can clear my mind. I can be outside. This is a win. So getting creative in that regard, and then developing some of those soft skills like budgeting, time management, prioritizing your relationships too, is really important. But it's hard. We're not saying it's easy. It's definitely hard. But you keep going.
Awesome. Kaylie, did you have any soft skills you wanted to add in?
Yeah, I think like personally, kind of what Kathryn said, like when I first started grad school, I was like, oh, I'm just going to work and not take care of myself. And like when I finish grad school, that's when I'll work out. And that obviously did not work. It took me like a month of doing that. And then I was miserable and like in a lot of pain. Like, okay, I need to move my body. So I definitely think like it just teaches you to prioritize your health and like, being better with your time, I guess. In I guess like career related soft skills, I've learned a lot. It's hard when you're in the thick of it because you don't really realize how much you've learned until you kind of get out and you start seeing like jobs and like the skills that they require, and you're kind of like, oh, I guess I know how to do that. I guess I know how to do that. For me, I think that kind of aside from the science aspect, it being in my master's and my PhD definitely helped me learn like communication, public speaking, being able to like articulate really difficult concepts and make sure that like an audience can grasp it. I think that I learned a lot of computer like data science. Because I do the gut microbiome. Gut microbiome research requires a lot of coding. And so I learned how to code in R. I probably could have learned more languages, but I hate coding. So I avoided it as much as I could. And I kind of regret that. But there's a lot of classes like at my university and others that encourage like you to learn Python or R, which I know that even if I don't go into academia, I can always be like a data scientist and you can make pretty good money doing that. So there's a lot of things I think like, I don't know, organization. I feel like I'm much more organized. Coming into grad school, I was very all over the place, but you have to be organized when you're writing. And then I think too, just like writing research in general is a really helpful skill to know. So yeah.
Yeah, I definitely can echo that piece about having an audience understand, these complicated concepts. In our exercises medicine club, we try to take really intense concepts that we learn in class and try to just have a casual conversation about it and see how it flows and where it goes. So that's definitely something fun we do too on top of that. Well, thank you for that question, Maria. And I hope that answered your question. We're going to open it up for some Q&A. I did put the girls' emails in the chat. I did not ask them permission, so please don't sell them anything or inundate them. But if you do want to talk to them about anything, that's in there. But I am going to open it up and see if anybody in the audience had questions. Feel free to unmute yourself or put it in the chat. And if it's just crazy, awkward, silent, I'll ask another question.
Perfect.
Okay, Justine. When you guys took a break from school, was it hard to get back into the mindset? That's what
so I was very adamant about taking a break because I've gone through a lot in my undergrad and I was like, I cannot do school anymore. And knowing like grad school was really hard, like we've talked about, like you need to be in the right headspace going into it or else you're going to burn yourself out. A lot of my family and friends were like, oh, if you leave school, you'll never come back. And that's entirely untrue. I think that it was really hard the first couple months of getting back into school. Like at SF State, I was like, oh gosh, okay, I have homework now. Like forgot what this felt like. But I think that you kind of at least for me, like taking the break was so necessary, because when I came back into it, I was really like refreshed and motivated, versus I think if I had gone straight from my undergrad into my master's, I would have just been super tired and like probably a little less motivated to do the work. So
yeah. I was like ready for that next step, that next challenge. So I took a break, partially like I was just like a little bit burnt out, and I could feel it. And I was coaching at the time, and I kind of just wanted to knock out some student loans, honestly, because it can be a burden, even as undergrads and whatnot. So I just wanted to kind of achieve that and then carry over. Then I was ready to like move forward. But you do have to kind of ask yourself, like, it is hard. It is an adjustment, like going back to PT school, and taking like 18, 20 units in a semester, it's a lot. So having those soft skills, like non-career related, or just kind of like understanding what things that you need to do to function well and to achieve all the volume of work is really important. So in that time off, it's not just like, oh, I'm just going to go on a beach, for 2 years. It's okay. Yeah. But I'm developing in other ways. We're consistently growing. So if you're kind of taking that mindset forward, you kind of know it's going to be hard, but you have those non-negotiables already set. So
Yeah.
can I ask what's your major, Justine? Or like, what are you thinking career-wise?
I did want to get into a DPT program, but like the financial burden is like what's really getting to me right now.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. It is expensive. It's a big price tag. In terms of looking at like physical therapy programs, and Kaylee, you can speak to this too in terms of like PhDs, but in DPT programs, you want to look at it as a career investment, because it's who are going to be your mentors, what are alumni doing now in the field, and then what are some solutions, like asking therapists, for example. I don't know if you're an aide right now, or if you've been to PT, be like, hey, what are you doing with those student loans? Because I thought it too. It is a big number. It's a big number. Kind of like you're buying a house, right? More or less. But it is a big number. But asking people, what is their loan? There's loan forgiveness, scholarships, doing a small job, or living at home, right? Those are all things that minimize that financial burden. Because what I see of experience, and then what I see in students is, once you're in the DPT program, you need to be like all in. So just saying like, yes, student loans in this case, unfortunately, and that's something with the profession, but unfortunately are a big component, and you're not going to fix it while you're in the program. So you need to, understand that, yes, it's a piece, but I can still be present to the learning, because on the other side of that, what job opportunities do you have? What resources do you have in terms of mentoring? Can you work in a clinical setting, and then the doors are open to you and into different areas where you will have likely 98% likely have better, financial opportunities.
yeah, I think it's different as a PhD, because as I said, you get they pay for your tuition. But I did another master's through USC, which was very expensive. So I have a lot of loans. And I have definitely like worked all throughout grad school. So I definitely understand the financial burden. I'm definitely privileged in the sense that I've been married for like 7 of the 8 years that I've been in grad school. So I have a partner that's helping to support me financially. But obviously not everybody has that. So I definitely agree though with Kathryn that I think that it's not that, especially like us being at USC, I feel like, USC is one of the top schools in the country. And so everyone's like, I want to go there. And I certainly think that there's something to be said for like the networking aspect. Especially I went to a state school for my undergrad and for master's, and there's a community there. There definitely was, but it wasn't anything like I experienced at USC. Like I'll get people, I was at the dry cleaner the other day, and someone saw that I was I was actually dry cleaning my cap and gown, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, you went to USC? What?" And they started talking to me, and I was totally like, "Huh? Like, why do you care?" But they went to USC too, and so there's something to be said for that. I know, and I've seen like lots of people, like lots of my friends who've graduated through the DPT program at USC, and they've gone on to go have amazing jobs, and they've got like a huge network. So it's worth it, I think. But you just kind of have to be smart about it. And there's definitely other options too that are much less expensive, that you can easily get just as much opportunity. Yeah, but it's difficult. I think you kind of have to be strategic and think, you know, maybe like 5 years out, 6 years out, as opposed to thinking that, like, if the financial burden is really high on your priority list right now, then I would definitely say, like, take the time to save some money and to kind of like really think about the program that's going to be best for you from a financial standpoint, because it's a huge burden for sure.
That's great. Thank you, ladies. Awesome. All right, Fausto. Do you think trying out different things in the field of kinesiology helped you find your career path?
Yeah, absolutely. I was like, I think I mentioned in the beginning, I wanted to be a PE teacher. I did one of the internships that we had to do for that like tract in my undergrad, and I absolutely hated it. I was like, no, this is not what I want to do. I transitioned to a bunch of different things, and I did personal training for a while. I've done personal training basically since I started in my undergrad, but yeah, I think it definitely is like a windy road, especially from a research standpoint. Like, I had no intention of studying Parkinson's or any, like, if you had asked me when I started grad school that I would be in this position, I would not have told you that at all. So, but I think just be open to like learning new facets of kinesiology. There's so many different fields you can go into, and they're all really amazing. And the more you can learn about each of those different fields, the better professional you'll be, whatever you want to go into. So, yeah.
Same answer. You know, like personal training is a big one. You can kind of take that with you. Group exercise instructor. Then you're just kind of building on that knowledge. You learn how to relate to people. You know, how do you talk to a big group? How do you explain an exercise to a big group? So yeah, I think it helped me in communicating, and also yeah, just being able to work with tons of different types of people.
Yeah, that's awesome. And for those of you who are SF State students, we have the Exercise Medicine Club. There's also the Muscle Fizz. They meet up. There's Gator Strong, which is a powerlifting and weightlifting club. And kind of just, if you see students just standing around talking in the kinesiology building, more than likely they're talking about something kinesiology related. We just can't help but have conversations about this kind of stuff. So yeah, the more you can experience, and in the personal training realm too, I mean, you just see so many different types of people and different types of demographics. So even if that's not the career path you want, I think that was a great piece of advice. So thank you guys.
Oh, I guess one other thing for that is like not even just like professionally, but personally, like I love to try different sports or like workout types just for the own curiosity. And then, you know, the patient comes in, they're like, okay, I tried this new group exercise class. What do you think about it? And I was like, oh yeah, I've tried it too, you know? So even yourself, like go try that, you know, aerial class or the like goat yoga, you know what I mean? Like something that's a little bit out of your comfort zone, because you're like, you're moving your body too. It's not just the cognitive component. So
Awesome. Any other questions, anybody?
Hello? You guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Mhm.
Hey, Susan.
I had a question. So research is obviously a big aspect to grad school and everything. Do you have any advice for an undergrad student who doesn't really have much experience with research, but is trying to get into it, like maybe learn how to read research or interpret research? Is there any advice that you would give them?
Yeah, the reading and interpreting research is a hard one to learn because it's such a different world. I remember the first couple papers we read in the master's program at SF State. Jessica knows we had to present like every week on different papers. And the first couple weeks I was like, I cannot do this because it's so hard to read research. It's like a different language. I think just like try like volunteer your time, try to like set up time to watch people do research, or if there's an opportunity for you to get involved in a research project, just do as much as you can. I know like, you know, master's students are always looking for help, and so they're never going to turn an undergrad down that wants to learn and to help them, whether it's like doing grunt work and, you know, cleaning up the lab after they're done with data collection, or just kind of like being around data collection, I think is really helpful. I think just kind of being willing and having an open mind and working hard is helpful, because then you can, you know, maybe help write an abstract, or maybe you can present it at like a conference or something like that down the line. As far as reading research, I think what helped me the most is to talk about it with other people. So it sounds kind of nerdy, but starting like journal clubs, like we do this at USC all the time, where there's like a group of us that like there's not a lot of people in my department that like physiology, because I'm in the physical therapy department and everyone's like biomechanics. But we have like a small group of people that like physiology. And so we meet like once or twice a month, and we just go over papers that we find interesting. You're going to find people if you just like reach out to, you know, other nerdy people in your class that, and I think that's really cool, because then you can kind of like start to talk through research articles, and you're probably going to stumble over your words, and that's totally fine, because it's really hard to read research, and scientists don't make it any easier. So, but yeah, just kind of see if there's any journal clubs that you can get involved in. I know we had one, I think when I was at SF State, but I don't know if it's around anymore. But if it's not, you can start one.
Kaylie, when is that physiology journal club?
It's every other Thursday at 1:00.
Oh my gosh, I might be able to make that.
And I am actually presenting at the next one if you want to come. I'm going to share my.
Wait, like this Thursday?
No, not this Thursday, but I think next Thursday.
Okay. Well, cool. All right, perfect. I didn't know about this undercover physiology club, but like I'm there for it.
Yeah, we're like the dark horses in our department. Everybody likes biomechanics. And
Yeah,
like
everyone likes the biomechanics. I'm like, okay, physics was not my thing. I'm more a phys person, but you guys have an amazing opportunity at SFSU, because one, Dr. Bagley and the department, but I can speak to this because I've seen when he, you know, went there, and just the massive growth, the beginning of the lab. His lab is really cool stuff. You guys are doing some really cool stuff with the virtual reality. You did the stuff with space flight, looking at even like doing the single cell isolation, muscle fiber typing and stuff, like a huge wealth of knowledge. So I hope you're tapping into that. He didn't even tell me to say this. I'm just being really honest with you. The Exercises Medicine Club, like the opportunity to take the Kines department and spread that to the entire campus, is also a huge opportunity. So just showing up, like doing something like this, showing up and like saying like, well, what sparks your interest? What's one thing that's interesting? But like going to the lab and just like being part of a data collection, being a participant yourself. When I was in grad school, like all of my peers didn't care what the project was. I was like, okay, I qualify. Okay, I'll do your study. So just be a participant. What is it like? What is that process? So yeah.
That was great. Thank you so much for that.
I've made Caesar read research for me. That's why he's asking.
You probably don't like her, huh?
I feel like in the beginning of the undergrad, and the program's changed a little bit, but Kaylie and I pretty much had to give a thesis defense on a paper that was already written and published. Like they would
like once or twice a week.
Yeah. And it was all on like the deep, dense mitochondria. So
oh my gosh,
anyway.
yeah.
And you probably like anytime you're like reading through or looking at research, you're probably not the only one that feels that way. Like in the beauty of the journal club and discussion is like, well, wait, I didn't understand this. Could someone explain? And then, oh, I understood what that meant, but I didn't understand the statistics on it or something. So beauty is the discussion. So we'll see Cesar at the next journal club.
Yeah, feel free to join. It's
yeah,
on
I'll
Zoom.
be there. Send me the address.
And you know, we will we try to go every year to the Southwest ACSM conference. It's the last weekend in October. So for those of you listening, connect with us, and we'll head down there and network, and we'll have a couple posters up there. So that is a great way to network and connect and kind of see what your options are as far as other schools and what we're doing at our school too, and the recognition of that. Yeah. Anything else from the peanut gallery? I'll give you guys a moment to fill it in, but before we head out, is there anything that either of you would do differently in your journey to where you are now?
I think I would have not been so afraid of statistics and taken more classes sooner. This is coming from like purely sciences perspective. If you're a DPT, you don't have to, you can ignore it. But I think kind of going off like the reading research articles, I was so intimidated by statistics, but it really is like the core of science. So if you want to go into a master's program or a PhD, like don't be afraid to take courses, because then when you're like me writing your defense, you'll have an easier time. But I also think too, like more, I guess, like from a developmental personal side of things, like there's a lot of people that'll have opinions, like especially, family or friends or like mentors. Really like make sure that you're taking time to like check in with yourself every step of the way, and like figuring out if a school or an advisor or a program is right for you, because it can get really, I got really distracted by like, oh, this one person is like the best person to work with and everyone's telling me that I should do this, so I'm going to do it, versus like listening to what my gut was telling me to do. So just like, yourself best, your circumstances best. Like definitely seek advice, but take it with a grain of salt, because like, nobody's in your particular shoes.
Yeah, and that's huge, is don't just do it because you're like, oh, this is really cool. And I like it right now. Like dig deeper, see if you mesh with the mentor, see if you mesh with the school or the program. That's such a hard question. I think the only thing is I would check in with myself a little bit more and get those non-negotiables set a little bit sooner. So like it really was PT school a little bit before, during that break, and then PT school where I was like, okay, I need these, 5 things in my life so that I am a better human and I can function better. So remember, you are physical, you are a soul, you are in school, and mental, the cognitive, the emotional components. So really kind of understanding what you want and what fuels your passion is important there. So in terms of changing, I mean, it is kind of cliche, but like all of that brought me to this point. So I think I would just do less comparing, because it's the like zigzag journey, and everyone's is going to be different. So I mean, I wouldn't be here if I hadn't had all of XYZ. So yeah, just kind of like looking back, like, wow, pretty grateful for that.
That's awesome. That's some great reflection. And I think we are going to head out of here, but thank you, both of you, for coming on and sharing your stories and your experiences and being transparent with us about what you've learned along the way. I think that what we really want for our students is for them to be confident and empowered leaders in any choice that they make in this health sciences field, because it's so important. We're really helping the world and we're helping the people in whatever direction we go in, and we want our students to be confident and excited about that. So I think you really did help with that today.
Yeah, we need you out here, so
yeah.
Keep up the good work.
You can do
All
it.
right.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. I have put the exercise medicine email and Instagram in the chat, so reach out to us if you'd like. We do have an interest form in our link in bio if you do want to join the club and be on the email list. This recording will be posted later. If you know anyone who is curious about continuing their education and you think they would find value in this, please send the recording to them. And remember that we care about you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.